I never really know how to start these things, because it always just seems so awkward. I'm really not a fan of the whole wrap-up thing, but honestly, I need a way to talk about the books I read in the last month because I really want to. But maybe I'll just change the format a bit later on because I really don't know how I'm going to do this in the future. But maybe I'll really like it. So I'm going to do an August wrap-up. I actually didn't read anything in July due to a certain book which I could not get through, which I will come to later, because I eventually finished it and quite enjoyed it. So keep watching. So I was on holiday in July and in August, part of July and August, but you'll always hear people say like, oh, I read so much on holiday, and I really don't. Especially in the first part of my holiday where I went on a really busy thing. So I just had no time for myself, and usually when I do have time for myself on holiday I get in some sort of slump, and then most of the time I read one book or something, which used to be quite good for my reading habits, but still I'm not the biggest reader on holiday. However, this time I read 2 books. So, yay, I did well. Afterwards, I read 4 more books in the month of August. So I just thought, I'm going to do my August reviews, because why the fuck not? And if I ever come up with a better thing, then maybe I will. I'm just not going to do 6 full-length reviews, even though every video I make apparently is more than 1 full-length video. It's more than like 2 or 3, but whatever, I decided I'm just going to go through them because I want to. First book, Stephen King's Salem's Lot. I've been looking forward to this for ages. I really love Stephen King. I really like vampire books, apparently. Well, actually, I just always have wanted to read vampire books. However, I actually haven't read a lot. Even Twilight I haven't read. So, yeah, it was a real disappointment actually. The build-up was good. The characters were quite engaging. Particularly King's portrayal of children is always very nicely done. However, most of this book was the action, and I didn't really care about it. I remember reading Misery and actually feeling my heart race because it was so enthralling, and this was just like, okay, this is happening, everything is really fucked for them. I really would not like to be them at this moment, but I'm not, so who cares? That was actually a bit the way I felt. Everything that wasn't action I really liked. There was a nice small town vibe, you know, with all the gossipy things. If you've read The Casual Vacancy, this is a horror Casual Vacancy in some aspect. I actually haven't finished The Casual Vacancy, but that's still how I felt. Not that I'm not going to finish The Casual Vacancy, by the way, but it just hasn't happened yet. This book consists of an introduction and then the story, and then a couple of things afterwards, like extra stories and then outtakes. The outtakes, I really couldn't care less. Most of them just didn't add anything to the story. Most of it was just the same thing happening in other words, almost. So I was just care. What this didn't have, what I was very happy about, was that awful portrayal of women that King sometimes has. Sometimes when King portrays women, especially in It, he portrays Beverly very strangely, especially when she's a child. It really focuses on her sexuality even when it's not relevant, basically. And he just doesn't do this here. So that's really nice. I was really happy about this. Maybe that's not really a King thing. Maybe that's just only in It. I mean, I don't remember it from Misery, but honestly, Misery only had 2 characters and one of them was Annie Wilkes. Honestly, that would not have happened. It was a good story, it just wasn't really for me, and I probably read it at a bad time. You always hear there's no perfect time to read a book, and there might not be, but there is something like a bad time to read a book, because I read this vampire book on holiday, on summer holiday in Iceland, where it doesn't get dark. So that was a bit of a thing where I thought, oh, maybe I could have read this during, let's say, Halloween or something. A moment where it is sometimes dark, but I didn't. So 3 stars for me. It was okay. Next thing I'll read by Stephen King is probably Pet Sematary. Probably during Halloween, because I really want to read something in Halloween theme during Halloween. And I have really been loving Stephen King this year. I've read 3 books by him this year. Oh, I'm really loving it. I'm just flying through them. Because that's what this book did for me. I flew through it. I almost read 100 pages a day, on a day on which I didn't particularly read much. Usually reading a lot for me is 50 pages on a day in a normal book. However, in Stephen King books it's like 150. So, yay! So I really like the build-up. I just didn't like the action. And that's awful with a lot of the books, the action. I remember in Misery that like my heart was just pounding and I could feel it pounding and it was so exciting. So it's not that I never liked the action. It's just now because it just didn't do it for me. Okay, so next I read a graphic novel called Paper Girls, which is written by Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by Cliff Chang. And the colors are done by Matt Wilson. The plot of this is very vague. With Salem's Lot it was very clear what it was about, you know? A man returning to his town where he grew up and where something bad happened and he just wanted to know what the fuck was going on effectively. And then things went crazy because it is Stephen King. However, this was mostly just things went crazy. There was a group of paper girls on Halloween night. They came across all these monsters, apocalyptic things started happening, and actually most of things were not really explained. I'm assuming that happens in the next volume. It wasn't really a story in itself, I felt. It was more part of an enormous story, and I understand that this is a graphic novel and it's probably a comic book thing with all the different volumes. But I would have liked, especially since this is a bound up, to have kind of a complete small part of a large story. In book series, in non-graphic novels, I find this even more important because sometimes you have these series, especially all those young adult series, which are just one story split in 3. And I really don't like that. I think every book must be a book in itself and must be able to be read in itself. For example, if you take the Harry Potter series, that does it quite well, especially in the first couple of books. It's just, if you want to start with the 2nd or the 3rd book, even though, of course, not everything gets re-explained, it's still a story in itself, you know? This just cut off halfway, I felt. Even though I really liked it at the time, but it feels like it's very action-packed. The illustrations, however, even though the illustrations were quite nice, the coloring was just out of this world, honestly. Just look at this. I actually quite like how it was written, but it wasn't perfect. However, I had a lot of fun reading it and I will pick up the next volume. So it's 4 stars, maybe 3.5. But let's go with 4. Let's be nice. A 4-star read. It was quite a lot of fun, even though it was a bit too action-packed. And you didn't really get to know the characters because of that. And that was my main issue with it, basically. So, the 3rd book I read. That was the book which I have been reading for months. It's, well, not anymore, but I had been reading this since June, I think. And then the whole month of July was just, oh, I'm kind of reading this, but I kind of don't want to continue. But I actually quite liked it in the end, and that's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I've never read any Austen, and I really don't get what the fuss is all about. even though it was quite nice. Part of me wishes I hadn't read it yet, because in all those videos like, oh, introduction to classics, and oh, these classics are really fun, it's always, oh, read Jane Austen, everyone loves Jane Austen. Well, I don't, even though I might pick up more, but that's a bit of a dubio. This is about Mrs. Bennet, who has 5 daughters and wants to marry off all of them as soon as possible. That's what the story is about, and it's basically a critique of Jane Austen on that. Basically, it's a societal critique, and in some points you really notice that, and that's a lot of fun. I really like the whole critique on society, critique on women just being married off without actually caring for who they're getting married to, etc, etc. However, especially in the beginning, it was so slow. The first couple of pages were amazing. I just thought, oh, I'm going to love this. And then I had to put it down for a while because of school. And after that, it just didn't feel the same. Maybe it's me because of that. Maybe that's the reason why I didn't enjoy it. But honestly, it just feels like, maybe it's the writing. I didn't particularly like the writing. I liked what she was saying, but I didn't like the way she was saying it. So that's quite a big thing, because I really care about writing, and usually it either is very straightforward and therefore very engaging, or it's just very beautiful writing. But this was neither. It was very slow, and I didn't like it at all. Also, I don't understand what all the fuss is about that first sentence, for example. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be a wonderful wife. Okay, that's kind of to the point, but it isn't beautiful or something. I don't know if people think it is, or why everyone's always saying, oh, it's my favorite first sentence. Like, honestly, in the beginning it was mostly about Lizzie's sister, Jane, and her romance, and I really couldn't care less about that romance. It was only when, no big spoilers or anything, only the ending, which everyone knows, honestly, but it was only when this started happening that it kind of picked up for me, and I kind of enjoyed it. I found that Mr. Darcy's rude behavior in the beginning wasn't really excused or explained that well. He wasn't, he said like, oh, I did this wrong, but that was because of this. But he didn't say, well, but the reason I was such a pretentious brat was because of this. That was just like, oh yeah, that's just his personality, I guess. I wouldn't want to dance either. That's not the point, but it's honestly, like, that's such a big deal, and that's why she doesn't like him, and suddenly that doesn't matter. So it felt a bit too instant, actually, even though I quite liked how the romance picked up near the end, so it's a bit contradictory. However, Lizzie is also quite a pretentious brat occasionally, so maybe that's why they're such a good match. I don't know. I really like Mr. Bennet. He was an amazing character, very, very witty, very... yeah, I really like that. And Catherine de Bourgh was also... she was so horrible that I kind of really enjoyed reading about her. But the rest of the characters were very bland, in my opinion. They're probably supposed to be stereotypes. I'm honestly so happy that Jane was the main character, because Jane was just Miss Perfect, who couldn't see anything negative in anyone, and Jesus Christ, get your shit together, man. For now it was okay, but if she had been mentioned even a little bit more, even, I was just, oh. And Lydia and Kitty is the other one. They were just like, oh, they felt very stereotypical, therefore you couldn't really engage with them, I felt, personally. I had the same with Mrs. Bennet, because you also couldn't really engage with her. However, I quite enjoyed Mrs. Darcy, and even though Lizzie was actually quite annoying, she really felt herself above her sisters, for example. But in spite of that, she was actually quite an enjoyable main character. I don't know if she's really lovable maybe she is. But yeah, that was kind of good. There's also Mary. Who the fuck is Mary? Honestly, she was mentioned like twice in the whole book. Well, the topic of the whole book is those 5 sisters getting married off, so that was a bit random. But basically, I couldn't really connect to the language. I think that was the main problem. I really loved the irony and the social critique. So I think I would recommend this. I mean, a lot of people love it, so quite a chance you'll enjoy it, particularly if you're a fan of romance. However, I think maybe because the letters were so small, that kind of felt like I just couldn't get through it, because I remember on holiday, I was just reading a page, and in an hour I'd been reading like 5 or 10 pages, and I just was feeling like, oh, for the life of me, I can't get through this. I don't know whether that was because of the writing, the very tiny font, or both, but I'm quite hesitant to read Dracula now. I bought it years ago. That's also a Wordsworth, but I've always been wanting to read Dracula, and I think I might really enjoy it. But I might buy a new edition just because I want the experience to be perfect or something. This was 3 stars. I mean, I can understand why I might even have enjoyed it myself. And in the end, I was like, oh, this is really good. I'm really enjoying the experience of reading this. But at the same time, I was kind of like, oh, I remember the struggle, you know? But I was also, at some point, I was just making sarcastic commentary in the sidelines. That made it a lot better, honestly. If you can just pretend like you're being the sarcastic old man from the Muppet Show, everything gets better.